Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Playbook with yours truly, Joe Trahan, and the one, the only, the great Ed Werder. And Ed, how about trade deadline day? How about the Cowboys owner? How about Jerry Jones actually giving us substantive news on draft deadline day? It didn't feel like it was going to be that way early in the morning, but Jerry comes through in the end with a blockbuster trade. What's your first blush?
After all of the promotion we endured yesterday from the Grandmaster himself, at self-promotion, 12 hours at Cowboys Stadium, AT&T Stadium, both before and after the game. And it's funny that the trade he was talking about making was the lesser of the two they wound up completing today. He was talking about the Logan Wilson trade, the linebacker from Cincinnati, which is kind of humorous in that they're trading from somebody who's lost his job on the only defense in the NFL that's worse than theirs. But there's rationale to support this move, I think. And then to turn one of those Micah Parsons first-round picks into Quinnen Williams is quite a shock, an astounding accomplishment. I think something that really significantly helps their defense beyond this year, which I think both of these trades had to do. Like, you can't trade at 3-5-1 and do it on the basis that, oh, we're just trying to improve our defense this year and we may lose the player after this. No, these players are under contract for several seasons, and the Cowboys have to maximize that opportunity. But interesting that when Jerry wanted to trade Micah Parsons, one of the calls he made was to the Jets to see if they would include Quinnen Williams, a defensive tackle, three-time Pro Bowl defensive tackle, in any such transaction. And they basically said, we don't have the wherewithal financially to pay Micah Parsons any more than you do, so we're out. And then they wind up turning one of the draft picks they acquired from Green Bay, potentially, guess could be their pick depending on which one's higher, into Quinnen Williams. So I think they've helped themselves with two immediate starters in their front seven.
The key for me, Ed, is what we've been talking about for the last couple of weeks. It couldn't just be about this season.
Yeah.
This had to be a foundational move for this ball club moving forward. So that meant it didn't matter if you were a seller or a buyer at trade deadline time. If you had an opportunity to create a big move, a big swing for your team that worked now and in the future, a foundational move, make the move. And they were able to pull it off. And listen, as critical as we are and should be with Jerry Jones, I'm fair too, Ed. They deserve credit for pulling off a big-time move like this. And then when you think about the Logan Wilson move as an accompaniment to it, and you start to look at how that Cowboys starting lineup could look in a couple of weeks when they play on Monday Night Football after the bye, they could have as many as 6 new starters.
And they need them.
Cowboys defense that is absolutely needed. Absolutely needed. So,
I think Matt Eber, it's a good day to be Matt Eberflus. There haven't been many of those since training camp ended. The defensive coordinator, third one in 3 years. Finally, I think he's got something to work with. Now we'll see what kind of coach he is. If for those who have any doubts about his qualifications as a defensive coordinator, I think we're about to see. The interesting thing to me, Joe, in this is we thought if they made a big acquisition, it would be for an edge rusher to replace Micah Parsons. Instead, they've now got 3 defensive tackles with Oso Digizua, who they signed long-term in the offseason to a team-friendly contract. They've got Kenny Clark, the player they acquired from Green Bay to be an immediate starter, and he's played well. And now Quinnen Williams, who, since he came into the NFL in 2019, he's got 40 sacks. That's the 5th most among defensive tackles after Chris Jones, Aaron Donald, DeForest Buckner, and Cam Hayward. Pretty good company. But the interesting thing is, how are they going to play all these guys? I think we maybe saw a little bit of a hint last night when they were playing 5-man fronts.
Yep.
So I think Eberflus is going to scheme a way to get these 3 guys on the field with, Donovan Ezeraku and, somebody playing on the outside linebacker who could rush the passer at times. It's creating new. It's gonna give Eberflus a chance to be strategic and creative. And I mean, we all know how bad this defense has been. I mean, they can't get off the field on third down. They don't create any takeaways. This is going to help them immensely, in my opinion.
And it will offer something, Ed, that we have rarely seen from this Cowboys defense. That you might have to go all the way back, to the great Jimmy Johnson with those defensive lines. And even back then, I don't think they had that run stuffing duo that they will have in Kenny Clark and Quinnen Williams. And the things that they can do with that twosome, with that duo, when you think about the one techniques and the three techniques and the way that you can move those guys around, and they can almost be interchangeable parts because they can play, both of those positions. I mean, they should be able to wreak some havoc from the inside. And listen, this defense is in a rebuild in the middle of the season. And
Yeah.
whenever you have a rebuild, Ed, you have to start with up front. And they're starting with the absolute foundation of the nose tackle, which I think is the best way to begin a rebuild. And again, I mean, as ridiculous and as wild a roller coaster ride as this season has been, especially with them offloading Micah Parsons the way they did, I think the Cowboys are going to have an opportunity to actually make good on that promise from Stephen Jones, saying that, listen, with Micah Parsons not being with us anymore, we think we'll figure out a better way to stop the run. Now, they had to go get Quinnen Williams to do it, but as you said, using one of those draft picks, this deal doesn't happen if they don't have the draft picks from the Packers. So they could make good on that promise to actually stop the run with the way this defense will show up.
It's also an admission of failure, I think, on the part of
No doubt.
Jerry and the front office, not only from the standpoint of, trading Micah Parsons, their generational pass rusher and the centerpiece of what Eberflus, thought was going to be his defense a week before the season opener in Philadelphia and all the upheaval that created. But just it's an admission that, hey, we didn't put together a good roster. Like, you should not be doing this in the middle of a season. This should have been taken care of before training camp, quite honestly. But at least they've been proactive. They've recognized, where they're failing, and they're doing what they can in a reasonable way. And they still have a lot of draft collateral. It's not like, I see they're getting criticized by some analytics people. Like, why are you, giving up a first round pick for, and it could be a top 10 pick. You're giving up a second round pick this year and a first round pick next year. The higher of the Green Bay Dallas pick could be a top 10 pick. Why are you doing that for a player who's going to be 28 years old and plays defensive tackle when the real value is at edge rusher, which is where you have created a hole on your roster? Now, Ezeraku, Jadeveon Clowney seem to be filling that void to a certain extent. But this is, like I said, I think it also an acknowledgement that, hey, they really set up Matt Eberflus to fail here, and it hurt the whole football team more than they expected. They thought that they could dominate offensively. Probably didn't imagine Dak Prescott was going to play at the level he started the season at. He hasn't played that well the last 2 weeks. And part of that, I think, is it creeped into the strategy, with Brian Schottenheimer.
Absolutely.
You saw him going for it on fourth down because he doesn't trust his defense. You saw in Denver, Dak Prescott forcing throws to try to come from behind. Just not a good way to play football. This will be...
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say this will give those two people, I think, a better opportunity to play in a more traditional approach.
I was going to make the observation, Ed, that the dysfunction was seeping down the sideline. It was flowing from the defense to the offense, and it almost had to, right? Because it was reactionary. They had to try and figure out some kind of way to make both units function together. And the offense, they took it upon their back and said, listen, we know we're the better unit, so we're just going to have to do more. But you know how the game of football works. Sometimes when you put all that pressure on yourself and you try to do things that the game doesn't allow you to do or doesn't want you to do or doesn't provide for you, it can get ugly. And it did. They went 0 for 3 on fourth down. They never made good on those pressure-packed plays. And listen, it's just part of it, and they had to learn from it. Now, I do want to go back. I want to circle back, Ed, because let's talk about the analytic crowd, shall we? Because here's what I would tell the analytics crowd about the value of these draft picks. Why don't you go back, make a diagram that shows the diminished value, because the Cowboys haven't been able to pick a defender in the first or second round in years, besides Micah Parsons, maybe Trayvon Diggs, right? Outside of that, go down the list and look at all those second rounders who didn't end up being anything. And look
Look
at
at the
those
first rounder
defensive
who was
linemen.
included in this
Yes,
draft.
right.
Mozzie
Smith, right? Let's go back to Taco Charlton. So let's go back, analytics crowd. Let's go back and figure out just how much those picks are diminished in value because this organization has shown that they cannot draft those players. So let's take that knowledge of the organization and say, you know what? We struggle at that. So we're going to take a known commodity in Quinnen Williams, and we're going to give up some of that draft capital. It is the fallacy of these analytical types thinking that, yes, there's a certain value with these draft picks. There's also a certain unknown, and there's an absolute roll of the dice that you can't quantify because you can't quantify what's in a guy's heart. You can only quantify times and all that other kind of stuff. But when it comes to development in this league, you can't quantify just how much you'll develop. And you'll never be able to do it. It is all projection, right?
This is the best way.
The crowd can just take that and shove it.
Why not have some of both? Why not have 3 first-round draft picks and have known All-Pro type players?
That's right.
And not only do you know their talent, you know what their contract status is, right? Now, I do think they're going to have a decision to make in the offseason because they've got 3 defensive tackles who are going to be making over $20 million. They're going to be, I think, top 6 salaries on the roster. They're going to have a decision to make there, but maybe that can lead to a trade that leads to the acquisition of another player or another draft asset or, you know.
Right, and I hope they have that in the plan, right? Because there is value in those players, and that can lead to more players and perhaps players that, again, are known commodities, right? So we're kind of, listen, it's tough. Is it the best way to roster construct? No. I totally, give into that argument. But sometimes you can't do it the best way because you've shown yourself that you're not capable. So, I do think you're right about that.
You'd love to draft Micah Parsons or DeMarcus Ware with every first-round pick you have on defense, but that's not been the reality of this franchise. And, to the point I was making earlier, see what you think about this, as far as how this was affecting in a negative way the offense, Brian Schottenheimer's a first-time head coach in the NFL. He's calling plays. He's already doing 2 jobs he wasn't doing in this organization last year. And now he can't just focus on that because he's in the defensive meeting rooms now trying to solve their problems too, that's part of being a head coach. Like, you got to coach the whole team. But I don't think they anticipated that in this circumstance where, your first month of being a head coach and a play caller in Dallas, and now you're having to try to rescue this defense as well. I think that has maybe detracted from the offensive performance the last couple of weeks as well.
I totally agree. I mean, I felt it, and I'm sure you did in Denver as well. And then we saw more of it, when that Cowboys offense couldn't really get cooking against not even an average pass defense, the 25th ranked pass defense in the NFL, and Dak Prescott and company, after that first drive, really couldn't get going. That's when I said, okay, listen, this has become dysfunctional. Because here's the thing, Ed, it's hard enough for a head coach and play caller like Brian Schottenheimer to continue to be successful in this league. But when you add more conditions onto it, and think about what those conditions may have been. We know about the 4th downs and everything, but are there also conditions of, hey, listen, we want to be a little more methodical because we want to keep that defense off the field. I didn't see near enough deep shots, right? And again, I saw some cover 2 shell. I get that part of it, right? But still, there have been times when Pickens, can get a one-on-one and even have, safety help, and Dak's still going to throw it. We didn't see those kind of balls, and I wonder if they've even gone so far as to have to restrict, some of these over-the-top shots, knowing that they don't want to get their defense right back out there because they know what's going to happen. Right? And they think to themselves, we got to be methodical. We got to chew clock. We got to keep our defense off the field. And it's just too difficult to try and manage all of that and still be successful in the hardest league on the planet.
Yeah, and it's like, well, Shotty, not only do you have to come up with a game plan and call plays every week, but you're going to need to score 35 or 40 points with that game plan every week. And you're going to have to do it without getting any short field turnovers or any help from the defense. So, and before you really devote all your time to that, we got some problems over here on defense we need you to get involved with. So yeah, it's a difficult situation. And then beyond what you said about the complication it causes for the offense is they don't get off the field. Everybody's driving the ball and owning the ball. You don't get enough possessions to score 30 or 40 points anymore, you know?
No, that's a great point, Ed. That's a great point because of the way other teams can move the ball. And I mean, think about it. Jacoby Brissett made 7 of his first 9 third downs.
And they were 3rd and 8, 3rd and 10, 3rd and 14.
Yes. Yeah, and that was the other, you're right. That was the other layer of it, right? There were some long pickups, and you know how demoralizing those are, not just for the defense, but for the guys on the sideline having to watch. I mean, it got to be comical when Deron Bland, your best corner on the field, trips himself. It was one of those moments where I said, that's absolutely emblematic of the dysfunction that we've seen from this defense. Your best corner on the field tripped himself and left a wide open Marvin Harrison Jr. who just walked in for the touchdown. And I was like, okay. I wonder how much of what we saw on display on a national stage, and let me even throw in Stephen A. Smith being in Jerry's box. I wonder how much of the embarrassment, utter embarrassment, of the product that his team put on the field fueled Jerry to say, okay, all right, yeah, we got to go big here. We got to go really big because this thing is off the rails.
Right. I definitely think that played a part in it. He was upset about the game yesterday. I mean, you heard Dak Prescott. He said, I'm not discouraged. That's not a good description of the way I react to these situations. I'm more determined, but it is frustrating. And we've kind of heard that theme, become more a part of the conversation in the locker room, and it becoming public that there's an enormous amount of frustration out there. And I mean, we can only imagine, knowing what we know, and getting a sense that there's a lot of friction on the defensive side of the ball. We can only imagine what it was really like in those meeting rooms when guys like Trayvon Diggs are telling their coaches that they don't want to play zone. They want to play man. That's why we're here. That's why I was great. That's why I led the league in interceptions. That's why Bland led the league in pick sixes, It's because we were playing that. We don't want to play this. So hopefully this calms that situation down. And like you said, bringing back Donovan Wilson, bringing back Malik Hooker, DeMarvion Overshown playing, Shavon Ravel becoming
possibly
available.
Playing, right?
Yeah. I mean, it could be a whole different look and a whole different level of athleticism and understanding and experience out on that field when they play the Raiders in 2 weeks.
Yeah, no, that's true, Ed. And I will say this, because while I do think this is a good day for Cowboys fans overall, I also think it's too late for it to have a major impact in this season. And that's a shame, right? But this team, they've got to take a long-term approach. And, I do think Matt Eberflus will be coaching for his job. I don't like that notion because that brings in the possibility of 4 defensive coordinators in 4 years, right?
Would be that, yeah. And
lack of continuity being, an issue as well. So, but again, I do think that's what the back half of this season has to be. It has to be getting this defense, not just functional, but getting this defense to chip in to where you can actually play complementary football and have a clue of how good this team can be.
And be able to do that in adverse circumstances, like against good teams, not against the bad. And now you're losing to teams that aren't. You lost to Chicago, you lost to Carolina, and not to diminish those teams. You lost to Arizona that came into your building at 2-5 with a 5-game losing streak and a backup quarterback who's a journeyman, and you played so poorly against him that you never led in the game. You lost by double digits, and now he's the starting quarterback over a former #1 pick in the organization.
And here's the thing. They've done that twice because Russell Wilson became the starting quarterback with the Giants, or kept his job, should we say, to only lose it later to Jackson Dart. But he wouldn't have kept it that long if it weren't for the Cowboys' ineptitude on defense. I mean, they are making quarterbacks, right?
One of one of the great stats to emerge from last night is the Cardinals, they only scored 27 points, but they're the 5th Cowboys opponent to achieve their highest point total of the season against the Cowboys.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. I mean, just you get a touchdown, you get a touchdown, you get a touchdown. I mean, it's hard to fathom, which kind of leads us to Logan Wilson because
I'm glad we're not going to overlook him. Yeah.
This morning, Ed, when I first read that, and I'm like, oh, geez. And listen, I don't follow the Bengals, so I just saw that, the young player came in and took his job, and I'm like, okay, they're getting a guy who got demoted from the only reason the Cowboys aren't the worst defense in the league is the Bungles. And I'm like, what is going on here? And I mean, the things I had written this morning, I'm not going to be able to say them, but I mean, it made my head spin a little bit there, Ed. But I will say this. It makes a little more sense because I suspect that the Bengals at some point made a value judgment and said, listen, we are going to try and move this guy. He is a progress stopper at this point, and they bring in, the young player, to which he says, all right, well, they must think I'm a progress stopper. Get me traded. And that's what they end up doing. It happens in the league all the time. I get it. And we'll see just how good Logan Wilson is and how much he has left in the tank.
And it especially happens, as we've seen here, when there's a defensive coordinator change, right? That's what happened in Cincinnati.
Yep.
And they went with the young players. He was a captain. And he handled the demotion really well. Like, he still tried to help these young players. But, I mean, this guy's he started in the Super Bowl his second season in the end. He's in the Joe Burrow, T. Higgins draft class. And just talking to some of the coaches today over in Dallas, they see him as a guy who can really read keys playing inside. He's good in zone. He has 11 interceptions. So basically, he's a huge upgrade from what I can take from the guy that has made a lot of money and played almost every snap, Kenneth Murray. I think Kenneth Murray is the guy who's going to be most affected by this particular trade.
The film that Kenneth Murray has put out there, Ed, is incredibly damning. Wow.
And he plays every down.
Yeah. I mean, the fact that they don't have anyone to put in for him is just, it's unbelievable. I mean, it's unbelievable. I mean, just the wrong gap after the wrong gap.
Can't get off blocks.
Step the edge.
Doesn't run hard.
Dominated by guards, centers, tackles, tight ends, wide receivers. I mean, it's just, how can that happen? And listen, the other thing that I hope these moves change is the overall play style of that defense.
Yeah.
Because it's got to be comical. They don't run hard. There's no juice. There was no juice in that building.
They're getting booed by their own fans.
Which they absolutely should have been. At the end of the first half,
they earned it.
Second half, zero juice. That defense sucked everything. They were sucking juice out of the bone marrow of the crowd and their fellow teammates. It was that bad, and it wasn't just subpar football. It was a sad excuse for being a professional, Ed. It went to a different level, and it was obvious. They're feeling sorry for themselves, and they're trying to blame other people, and it was just sorry football. And I'm glad it was on Monday Night Football for Jerry to have to sit there and watch, and it precipitated action in a very good way.
Yep. I agree. I mean, there's a lot of talk from, the phrase Schottenheimer uses all the time is the accountability. And I just don't think they could hold people accountable because they didn't have any good options. Like, as bad as these guys were, to make a move would put somebody else in place. Yeah. But the crowd reaction and adverse reaction from the crowd was really the result of just watching these guys miss tackles, like, for no reason. I mean, how many times did Shamar James, and I know he's a rookie, I mean, how many times did they throw it in the flat and just let the running back, beat him with a simple move? He couldn't even pin the guy against the sideline.
Well, and in some instances, Ed, he was throwing no hitters. I mean, not even touching. And then for me, it was like it became kind of pervasive, right? Because I saw a couple times, even on special teams, Leofau was going down one time, and he had a beeline on the returner. He didn't come within 3 yards of him, Ed. And I'm like, what are they doing? Just zero fundamentals. I mean, how could they be teaching these guys? Listen, I mean, just the most
we see them do the
thing.
drills. We see them do the drills every day out there.
It's crazy. I mean, you have to break down to tackle someone. That's kind of how it works.
Yeah.
And then they weren't even able to do that. The footwork, the angles, the most basic tenets of playing defensive football are non-existent. And again, I don't know if the clock is just speeding up in their head because they're getting drove on. And, I'm sure that's how it happens, right? They're driving on you. They're driving it down your throat. They're scoring on you. And your head just kind of starts spinning. And you just start trying to, act and go faster.
Become tentative and
yes, either one or the other, right?
Yeah.
I mean, but it just became comical. And when Mike Nolan was defensive coordinator here, Ed, those games were incredibly difficult to watch. Zim, at the beginning last year, some of those games were hard to watch. But these games have just become comical. It's like, okay, I'm wasting my time here by watching what they're putting on tape. It's
been a long-term problem, with the exception of the 3 years that Dan Quinn was here. And they drafted Micah Parsons that same offseason. They created a defensive identity that was all about creating pressure on the quarterback, creating mistakes, defensive takeaways, defensive touchdowns. I mean, those teams had an identity to the point that, Mike McCarthy, the head coach and the offensive play caller, his whole career has been coaching offense and playing the game through the quarterback. And yet even he was like, hey, I'm going to let the defense do its thing. Like, let them take over the game, Right. Let's just not lose it on offense. So that's how good now they failed in the postseason. And they failed because they couldn't stop the run. And that's where Jerry got the idea that, hey, we need to prioritize on defense stopping the run. And they should be able to do that now.
They have certainly done that. If they can't stop the run now, we got serious problems because Jerry's got himself a real war daddy, as he likes to say. I mean, Quinnen Williams is the inside epitome of a war daddy. And, I'm looking forward to seeing what he can do. At least they'll make the last half of this season.
Exactly.
If nothing else.
Exactly.
It's a shame it's too late in the process, right? I was hoping against hope that somebody could get to somebody and they could make the big swing early and not wait for the trade deadline. But you and I both know that Jerry Jones has that,
deadlines make deals.
That tenet, that deadlines make deals. And Ed, the more we deal with this, the more I believe in my soul that he needs to let that one go.
Yeah.
Because I think the smart people get out ahead of things. And if you would have got Quinnen Williams a couple of weeks ago, again, do you get the same deal? I don't know. Is it much bigger or better for you? Probably not. It's probably close to the same thing. So you waited all that time. You wasted that time. You lose a couple more games.
You're 3.5 behind the Eagles. You got the toughest part of your schedule ahead of you. I mean, maybe they'll prove to be up to it.
Getting to 9 wins, trying to win 6 of the last 8, Ed, that's not happening with when you think about after the Raiders, you think about the Eagles, Chiefs, Lions, Vikings, and Chargers. And then you got the Commanders, and then you finish up with the Giants. So, I mean, there's 6 of those?
Tough.
Just to get to 9?
Tough.
Which doesn't even ensure that you're in.
But we haven't seen this team yet.
Really tough. I mean, they need the Eagles to crater. I don't think that's going to happen.
Happened once before.
I don't know.
Ago. Cowboys won the division when it seemed impossible. They did nothing with it. They did nothing with it, but
I agree. I mean, they gotta hope that those receivers and Jalen Hurts have some kind of falling out. They gotta hope that Thanksgiving dinner goes crazy. They gotta hope that the team party over the holidays goes nuts. They gotta bank on all of it and hope that the Eagles just fall apart. Jalen Hurts and his receiving core, they got to hope that they just have a knockdown drag out. That's about the only thing they can hold their hats on.
Maybe they'll sign Odell Beckham Jr. and they'll take everybody on a cruise to the Caribbean.
Yeah. Okay, that could work. That could work. It's worked before. It's worked before. All right, brother. Great stuff as always. It's the fastest 30 minutes in sports. That is what we do normally on Mondays here on WFAA Plus. That's the Playbook with yours truly, Joe Trahan and Ed Werder. Ed, we don't have a game next week, so stay tuned. We may have a Playbook on Monday at 7 o'clock, but if not, certainly the following Tuesday after the Cowboys play the Raiders on Monday Night Football on November 17th. All right, Ed, thanks so much. Great stuff as always, brother.
Thanks, Joe. Fun show.
All right, be good. Thanks.